This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new episode of Behind the Headlines. Charlie Greenwald, our usual host, is on assignment, so we hope to have him back soon. I'm very fortunate to have as my co-host today, Jerry Strittmatter. Welcome, Jerry.
Hi, Maura. Nice to see you.
It's very nice to have you here.
Happy to be with you.
Well, we're really very fortunate to have back again Jamie Martin, who is the president of APSCA, which is the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculty. Welcome, Jamie.
Hi, Mara. It's really good to see you again. And hello, Jerry. Nice to meet you.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
You, Jamie, you always have a lot going on. So I know that we've talked about this before, but I know we're anxious to get an update on the situation regarding consolidations in the state system. Can you give us the latest? I know that it all got started not last summer. It did get started recently, but you can give us the background on that.
Sure. So this began probably last October during a board meeting when the chancellor spoke about his view. They were calling it integration. We're calling it consolidation because that's what Act 50 of 2020 refers to. Integration doesn't appear in that law. And so right now there are two trios, three in the north central part of the state, so Bloomsburg, Lock Haven, and Mansfield, that are due to be consolidated. And then in the western part of the Commonwealth, California, Clarion, and Edinburgh universities are supposed to be consolidated as well. In terms of where we are in the process, what I'll say is the chancellor keeps saying that we're still in the planning process, but he's articulated fairly often that his view is that we'll have one university in each of those regions with one accreditation, one leadership team, one faculty, one program array, and one budget. And so even though they're still filling in some of the meat, it sounds like we already know what the plan is, at least in his view.
So what are some of the primary issues of concern, especially on behalf of students that you're trying to work with them on?
Well, some of the concerns that we're hearing from the students are things like, if I am a student at Mansfield, will I be able to complete my degree at Mansfield University, or am I going to be getting a degree from some other entity? I'm hearing from some of my colleagues, they're having trouble recruiting students to a campus because of the uncertainty of what this new entity will look like. And then we're also worried a little bit about programs. Are the programs going to continue? On what campus might the psychology department be housed? So there are lots of questions we have as it relates to our students and their ability to seek the degree they want at the university that they want. And so those are some of the concerns we're hearing from them.
Overall, it's great concerns because the university system has been an asset to the Commonwealth. The fact that it's spread across the entire Commonwealth, the fact that we take care of our children, our next leaders here, to go and mess with this now, especially with all the other changes, just seems to make no sense at all. Because really, you're training everybody for our future leaders, and also you're the economic development hub of our entire Commonwealth. And when we have to be starting up again, it just makes no sense at all to be doing this. Do you think it's possible that this could be delayed and looked at this in a fresh start, especially because I think the university system will be looked on in a different light this coming year?
Yeah, and you tap on a lot of good areas and issues. We really are seeing this in an accelerated time frame. So we're talking about a very short period of time to make major changes to our universities. The other kinds of things, you mentioned the economic drivers, and our universities in most of these towns in which they're located are the economic drivers for those areas. And we don't know to what extent consolidations would have, what economic impact would they have? We don't know that yet. And then third, we don't know what the cost savings will be from the consolidations. So are there going to be significant cost savings that would be attributed to that or not? And one other unknown at this point, although we're hearing more positive news, has to do with athletics. There's a lot of concern about, would there still be a basketball team at Bloomsburg and at Mansfield and at Lock Haven once they're consolidated? We're getting some hints that that might be possible, but the NCAA has to rule on that. And if they made that kind of ruling, it would be an exception to their rules. So, for our coaches who so ably recruit student athletes and the student athletes that are on scholarship right now, we have concerns about those students as well in terms of, will their sport still be there once this integration or consolidation occurs?
Is there a timetable set for all this, or do you have certain expectations, or what's the plan right now?
Well, the Board of Governors actually meets for one of their regular meetings this week on Wednesday and Thursday. I expect that the Chancellor will give an update at that point in terms of what's happening, since October till now. At the April board meeting is when the full plan is supposed to be presented to the Board of Governors. That would open a 2-month window for public comment and public hearings, and then a final plan would be approved or not approved at the July board meeting. So we're talking about a really accelerated process with a lot of questions that still need to be answered. If that was approved, then they're supposed to be in effect for the fall 2022 academic year. So, in academia, that's a really... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh.
I was going to say, since this is so accelerated, should the viewers that we have across the Commonwealth that are certainly supportive, should they be contacting the commissioner? Should they be contacting their state legislator, their congressman, their economic development directors in each of their counties? I'm sure that when people hear about this, they're going to be very concerned. And I don't know if that 2-month window is going to be enough to do that. So we should really start now with you, letting everybody know that, you should really, start contacting these people. Can you give us a summary for all the viewers?
Well, I think certainly for individuals in those communities who might have questions about the economic impact, what would be the impact if there are job losses associated with this on local businesses, on the local sub shop, on the local barbershop or salon, all of those kinds of questions. I think those are legitimate questions that would have to be answered, if not by local community leaders, then certainly by legislators who have the opportunity to ask those questions. The one piece I forgot to mention is next week on February 9th, the Chancellor will go before the House and Senate Education and Appropriations Committees. And I feel fairly certain they'll be asking questions along those kinds of lines. So if community members had concerns, that might be a good avenue to go to their legislators and say, we have these kinds of questions that we would like answers to.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. We've talked before about retrenchment letters that were sent out, I believe, starting last summer. Can you give us an update? But first, I'd like to do this for our viewers. Can you first explain what a retrenchment letter is, and then give us an update on them?
Certainly. So receiving the retrenchment letters in our collective bargaining agreement just basically means that a person will lose their job. And it's through no fault of their own. It's not because of disciplinary or not because of lack of job performance. It's simply a downsizing. So in October, at the end of October, about 130 faculty members received letters indicating they would be retrenched at the end of this current term, so at the end of the spring semester. We now have about 97 or 98 that remain, and those are located at 5 of our universities. And so we're able to see some that were rescinded because of different reasons. And in some cases, we had more senior faculty members decide to retire to save the positions of a junior colleague. And in some cases, there may have been some changes made by the administration in their decision-making about the number of layoffs that will occur. But we have grave concerns, not just because of the job loss, but people are going to be losing their health care in the middle of a pandemic. And those, that I keep trying to stress, that if we had a bit more time, we may be able to assist these faculty members with identifying other positions, or for colleagues who are thinking about going to another university or another university system, that it is difficult to do an interview or to move a family and find housing in another city in the middle of a pandemic. And so there is no way that, the chancellor or our, university presidents could foresee the nature of this pandemic when they began to issue these. But at this point, we know vaccines are there, and probably by the end of the summer, people could be vaccinated. So if we had a little bit more time to assist with our colleagues, that would be extremely helpful.
It would be good for the chancellor and the legislators to remember that the university system has gone through many changes before, and that they've always been strong, and that a knee-jerk reaction of a few positions here or there, just think back when we were known as a teachers college, and the fact that there need to be changes, and yourself being criminology, that I think that you have to be careful, because if you make bad choices now, you're not going to be able to adapt in the next year or two, when things get better. And so I would hope that you have much success, as I say, with our viewers, of getting that point across, that with this isn't something that you just make a snap decision on. This is something that really goes over a course of years. When we look back over the whole system, it's been good for the Commonwealth, and we want it to remain so. Correct?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with everything that you've just laid out. I mean, we were always, the mission of our university system was to be a high quality, cost effective, or affordable option for students in our Commonwealth. And oftentimes those are first generation college students. That's still who we're hoping to provide an opportunity for. And I think if we start to lose these universities in the way that they've existed, that will be a detriment to those communities and those students who want to remain at a university close to their place of residence.
Jamie, your website has a significant amount of information about all of this, and I think it's a very useful resource. Can you tell our viewers, as we end our segment here, what your URL is, so that they can go and learn a lot more about this issue?
Sure. If you go to apscuf.org, there is information there about retrenchment. So we have a retrenchment toolkit that gives all kinds of information about the process and has frequently asked questions. And then we have a separate section on the consolidation with similar kinds of information that we've been able to compile. So for anybody that has questions along those lines, there's a lot of information there. We have a wonderful PR person, and she's compiled most of this information for us.
Well, that's awesome. Well, we want to thank you very much for being here today and providing us with these really interesting updates on what you've been up to. And we look forward to having you back again soon, because we know these are ongoing issues. So we'll be talking more and more about them.
Thank you so much for having me this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. You have a very important mission. You're doing a great job. So thank you very much for being with us today to spread the word.
Yes, thank you again.
Stay tuned for a new segment of Behind the Headlines coming up.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Behind the Headlines is also brought to you by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. The Pennsylvania Chamber serves as the frontline advocate for business on Pennsylvania's Capitol Hill by influencing the legislative, regulatory, and judicial branches of state government. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Hi, welcome back. On this segment, Jerry and I are going to be joined by Bob Latham, who is the Executive Vice President of APC, the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. Welcome, Bob. It's good to see you again.
Mara and Jerry, good to be with you as always. Thanks for having me.
Well, we have an issue that just is not going away for you that we're going to talk about again. There has been a lot of impact of transportation, construction funding over the last year, highly impacted by COVID. So why don't you give us an update, because there's been a lot going on with in the state government with regard to the funding. What's happening?
Sure. Let's have a little almost year in review, 10 months in review. Back in March of last year, the governor shut down the entire transportation construction industry in an attempt to assuage COVID. Of course, the economy was shut down for 6 weeks. People were kept indoors. They didn't drive. And we have a funding system for transportation, particularly for highway projects, that is based on the consumption of fuel. When fuel is not being consumed, revenue or gas tax revenues are not being raised. So there was a significant loss in revenue for construction funds as a result of COVID. The economy opened up again in June. Construction projects started again in June. And as our industry would do, they accelerated. They moved quickly. They met the challenge, and many of the jobs got back on track. Unfortunately, with the loss of sort of cash influx for the department and the acceleration of those projects, the bills all came due in the fall, and that created yet another crisis, which was a cash flow crisis that PennDOT found itself in, and so at the end of November, the PennDOT informed the General Assembly and the public that it was out of money. And I've been around this business for a long time. I've never seen this happen before. So that's another COVID first is a state Department of Transportation literally out of cash. Fortunately, the federal government passed the COVID Relief Act at the end of December, and that meant that money is coming to Pennsylvania in order to sort of back and fill that cash flow need, and we should be able to get things going again here shortly. So immediate crisis averted, but we still have this funding issue going forward that continues to be unmet.
The big issue is still not resolved. I mean, you just got the crisis beyond the crisis, mostly created by COVID. And now you have to go back to the drawing board on how do we fix the overall funding. So give us a little bit of background on that, where that huge deficit comes from and what the status of it is.
Sure. So some of the issues that they're really facing, let's go back to 2013. We passed a very comprehensive transportation funding bill. Again, kudos to legislative leaders at the time, Speaker Sam Smith, and Senate Transportation Committee Chair John Rafferty, neither of whom are with us anymore, by the way. So we have a whole new set of legislative leaders and a lot of new legislators that weren't around when that bill passed. Now, what we've seen happen is with the growth of fuel efficient vehicles and fuel economy, and quite frankly now a concern over a systemic drop in driving as people do more and more work from home. We're seeing about a 15% reduction in travel statewide. So there's a 15% drop in gas tax revenues, and that's having an impact on the ability of PennDOT to fund future projects. So that's where we are, and this is exacerbated by the fact that we have the second highest fuel tax in the country, and what we're seeing, and of course, but unfortunately, we take a large portion of that, almost 25% of that, and we shift it over to the general fund to kind of prop up the general fund. It goes under the auspices of the state police, but it's really just a shift over to the general fund. So if we could stop that general fund transfer, which is some $700 million a year. That would go a long way to backing and filling some of the unmet need for highway work and transportation work in Pennsylvania.
And Bob, isn't it true that the other bad behavior since 2013, and the reason that the dollars were raised by Pennsylvanians, to help the country. So in 2013, the dollars were raised to get the federal match of the infrastructure for highways that was supposed to be passed, by Congress. That's never been done, and it continues to not be done. And they continue to just kick that can down the road and make bad decisions. And so, can you tell us a little bit more about how that does affect, every county and every person? Because we're talking about safety. The reason you raise dollars, the reason you improve these things, is to have it safe. So when the children go off to school, on the school bus in the morning, then we want to make sure that they come home. And so, tell us a little bit about what the people should be saying to their congressmen and congresswomen to make sure that that this is taken care of.
Jerry, you're absolutely right. Again, having been around long enough, I've seen several presidential administrations come and go. And with each new administration, whether it be George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, or Joe Biden, at the beginning of the administration, there's always this, this is the administration that's going to have a massive transportation infrastructure bill. Well, we're still waiting, because the last time Congress increased any funding for roads was about 1994. And you're right, when we passed Act 89, the transportation bill here in Pennsylvania, we got to about 2/3 of the need. We figured Congress might back and fill the other portion of that. That never happened. We sort of bump along now with some static funding at the national level. And the problem is this: I'm currently reading a book about President Eisenhower, written by his granddaughter Susan, which is a fantastic book called How Ike Led. And of course, Eisenhower worked on a bipartisan fashion with the Democrat Senator Al Gore and started the interstate highway system. 70 years later, we have the interstate highway system, a modern wonder of the world, but the states are left to pay for the entire thing. And in Pennsylvania, we have some 2,000 miles of interstate highway throughout our Commonwealth. That's a lot of roads to take care of. Look at the geography and the climate in Pennsylvania. As Brad Mallory, former secretary, said, we're old, cold, and wet. It's really hard to keep concrete and steel that way. So, we would like to see the federal government do one of two things. Number one, either allow us to toll the interstates in order to raise money to pay for them in a systematic way, or fund it themselves. So, either lead, follow, or get out of the way.
So Bob, one of the issues that is in the mix in terms of solving this issue is the alternative fuels tax. And I know I'm somebody that kind of doesn't think that much about electric vehicles because I'm, gas driven and plan to be for a long time. But you almost can't even open up the news these days without seeing more news about electric vehicles. President Biden has said he's going to have the federal fleet of cars all electric. Many car companies are moving in that direction. So it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. Can you tell us a little bit about why the alternative fuels tax issue is in the mix and why it is so important?
Well, about 19 states, 20 states so far, Maura, have passed a registration fee on all electric vehicles that is commensurate with the amount of money that the people like you pay in gas tax per year. And the thinking is, if you're using the roads, you should pay for them. And right now, if you have an all-electric vehicle, you're not paying any kind of commensurate highway user fee. Plug-in vehicles are going to be the wave of the future, and/or hydrogen battery vehicles. And so right now, absent what is being kicked around as a vehicle miles travel tax, which is interesting. We've been talking about, getting away from a consumption-based tax to a mileage-based fee system. for some 20 years, and I've heard for 20 years that a mileage-based fee system is 5 years away. So we should have enacted that 4 times by now, but it's still 5 years away from what I heard in a meeting with one of the congressional leaders from our national association just the other day. So they're still balking at that. So a commensurate registration fee is about the only thing going. We almost passed it at the end of last session. It fell short of getting over the finish line, and we hope to bring it back this year.
I think we have to tie it in. I think we have to tie that in with the safety issue, and about the children, about, when our family members leave, at the beginning of the day, we want to make sure they come home at night. So I believe that it should be focused. As many times it happens, you do it because of the children and because of safety, not because of the fact that we need new highways, but the fact that we need safe roads. And that's been missing for so long in people's thoughts. They just think that, oh, this will just be taken care of by the road ferry. There aren't any, and we need to have those dollars.
Touch on the safety, and one of the things I want to leave the viewers with here is a more positive story here. I mean, we have a tendency to talk doom and gloom, on funding a lot, but let's go back to the bill that was passed. And and if you're watching this and you are paying the second highest gas tax in the country, one thing I do want to tell you is we have enacted a lot of safety improvements as a result of that bill that was passed. We had 6,000 bad bridges in 2013. We've cut that number in half, down to 3,000. So we are very much improving the safety of bridges. A lot of the work that was done, the reason we have this highway issue that we just talked about is because a lot of the focus of that bill was on local roads. And to your point, Jerry, the safety of local roads, better signalization, better highway safety appurtenances, more guide rails, more delineation and barriers and turning and more safer turning lanes and widenings and that sort of thing. And I do want to point out that in 2018 we had the lowest number of highway fatalities in the history of the statistic. Now think about that. That goes back 100 years. And think about the number of cars that were on the road then versus the number of cars now, and the actual number of highway fatalities was the lowest in recorded history. So we have made a lot of improvement, and thank you for bringing that up.
We never have enough time with you.
Never.
I'm going to wish you luck in this upcoming legislative and budget session. Hopefully we'll see some changes in transportation. And I want to thank you.
Happen and a lot of work to do. Thanks, Maura.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Bob,
for being here. Jerry and I are happy to have had both of our guests today. So we want to thank everyone, and we'll see you next time on Behind the Headlines.